The air in Lyra Station's transit hub was always thick. It smelled of ozone from the energy grids, of strange metals from alien ships, and of the recycled air that every being, from the gas-filtering Vol to the oxygen-loving humans, had to share. To Jay, it was the smell of work. She moved through the crowded main corridor, a small figure in a simple gray maintenance suit. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight, practical bun. She kept her eyes down, not from shyness, but from focus. The hub was a chaos of flashing lights in colors some eyes couldn't see, and languages that buzzed, clicked, and hummed from hundreds of speakers. Jay heard it all as a kind of messy music. Her job was to help keep the rhythm. Her destination was Subnode 7, a minor power relay junction buried deep in the service decks. To the Galactic Concordance, it was a non-critical system. To Jay, it was a puzzle that had been bothering her for 3 weeks. The door hissed open to a small, warm room filled with the deep hum of converting energy. Lines of blue and amber light pulsed along the walls. Jay placed her tool case on the floor with a soft thud. She called up the diagnostic screen. The numbers scrolled past. Efficiency, 91.3%. It was within acceptable parameters. Every species in the concordance would have left it alone. Jay frowned. Acceptable was not the same as right. 3 weeks ago. She had noticed a tiny, repeating lag in the power transfer here. It was a minuscule thing. It wasted a tiny amount of energy every cycle. Over a standard year, it would waste enough to power a small shuttle. No one cared. The concordance had energy to spare. Their systems were built by many different species, and sometimes the parts did not talk to each other perfectly. But Jay cared. Waste was a silent enemy. On Earth, in the cramped solar ecology where she grew up, waste meant someone went cold or hungry. Old habits died hard. She had spent her off hours studying the junction's code. It was a patchwork of programming languages from 3 different civilizations. The problem was in the translation layer. The systems were politely waiting for confirmations that were never needed, like 2 people bowing to each other forever, never moving on. Her solution was simple. She had written a tiny piece of bridging software. It was only 50 lines of code. It did not force anything. It simply introduced the 2 systems properly so they stopped bowing and started working. Installing it was against the rules. All modifications required approval from a panel of 3 different species, a process that could take a year. Jay looked at the pulsing lights. A year of waste. She took a small data chip from her pocket. Her fingers hesitated for a moment over the main access port. Then, with a quick, sure movement, she slotted it in. The screen flickered. New numbers appeared. Efficiency, 91.8%, a 0.5% gain. A smile touched her lips. It was a small victory, utterly private. No one would ever know. The hub would just run very slightly smoother. That was enough. She removed the data chip and tucked it back into her suit. As she packed her tools, her personal communicator buzzed. It was a message from her brother. Min Hey. Made the run to Tau Ceti. Cargo bay smells like old fruit. Miss real food. The logs here are weird. Shipment of Terran grain is listed as industrial lubricant on the dock manifest. Stupid mistake. We're lazy. Tell you later. Don't work too hard. Jay typed a short reply. Asterisk not a mistake. Check the fee schedule for hazardous material versus agricultural. Someone is saving credits. Be careful. Subnode 7 is happier now. Asterisk Min would understand. He knew her quiet war on waste. He fought his own battles against what he called stupid systems. She left Subnode 7, the door sealing behind her. The main corridor was even busier now. A hulking Grathan trader, its carapace gleaming, brushed past her, not seeing her at all. A pair of slender, silver-skinned illusions glided by, their conversation a series of musical chimes. Jay felt a familiar loneliness. It was not the sadness of being away from Earth, but the quiet of being unseen. She was a background piece in this vast, alien painting. She was fine with that. Background pieces could observe. She headed towards the central food court, a vast open space where different species kept to their own atmospheric zones. The human section was a bubble of familiar air, smelling of steamed rice and seasoned vegetables. She got a bowl of simple bibimbap and sat at a small table near the clear wall. From here, she could watch the docking arms of the hub. Ships of every shape locked and unlocked like metallic insects. One ship, sleek and marked with the symbol of the Viridian Consortium, caught her eye. It had docked at a premium berth. She had seen their ships more often lately. The consortium was powerful, a blend of species with lots of money and political influence. They were bidding for control of several trade routes, including some humans used. Her communicator buzzed again. A public service alert scrolled across the screen. Reminder: all non-essential personnel are to vacate Central Core during the peak energy cycle for system diagnostics. Concordance Authority thanks you for your cooperation. Standard message. But the timing was always the same, right when the consortium ships were running heavy data transfers. It was probably nothing, just another coincidence in a busy station. Jay finished her food, cleaning the bowl meticulously. As she stood to leave, she saw a group of Concordance security officers across the court. Their gray and blue uniforms stood out. They were not eating. They were scanning the crowd. Their eyes, behind their visors, swept over the aliens and stopped. They were looking at the human section. For a second, Jay thought their gaze landed on her. A cold trickle, like ice water, went down her spine. It was an illogical feeling. She had done nothing wrong. The 0.5% improvement was a gift, not a crime. She shook the feeling off. She was being silly. They were probably looking for someone else. She disposed of her bowl and walked back into the thrumming heart of the station, back towards her next job. The hum of the station was a constant companion. It sounded normal. It sounded fine. In the quiet of her own mind, she replayed the numbers from the cargo log Min had mentioned. Grain listed as lubricant. It was a classic trick to avoid tariffs. But why would a powerful consortium bother with such a small, petty fraud? Unless it wasn't about the credits. Unless it was about hiding what the grain really was or what was hidden inside it. She stored the thought away, next to her observation about the public service alerts and the consortium's data transfers. They were just pieces of data, unconnected, for now. Her shift ended, and she walked back to her small living quarters. The room was simple. A bed, a desk, a small window looking out onto a service shaft. She sat at her desk and opened a basic star chart on her screen. She plotted Min's location at Tau Ceti, then the route of the Viridian Consortium ship she saw. The lines on the chart did not cross. Not directly. She closed the chart. It was just her mind looking for patterns where none existed. That's what humans did. They connected dots. Sometimes the connections were real. Sometimes they were just stories they told themselves in the dark. Jay prepared for sleep. The day, small victories and quiet questions settling around her. The station's gentle vibration was a lullaby. She did not know that the dots were real. She did not know they were about to connect, with her at the very center. The start of Jay's shift was normal. The station's artificial morning cycle had begun, with the lights in the corridors brightening slowly to mimic a sunrise. She reported to the main engineering bay for her assignment. Her supervisor, a tired-looking man named Mr. Park, barely looked up from his screen. J. Primary Coolant Monitoring Station, Alpha Wing. Routine sensor calibration. The checklist is in the system. Don't touch anything else. His tone was flat. He said the same thing every time. I understand, Jay said softly. She collected a standard calibration kit. The walk to the Alpha Wing was long. This part of the hub was quieter, more important. The walls here were thicker, the hum deeper. The primary coolant system was the station's lifeblood. If it failed, the core would overheat in minutes. Everyone was careful here. She reached the monitoring station, a small room with one large window looking into the coolant conduit chamber. Behind the thick, transparent metal, a river of glowing blue fluid flowed silently, carrying heat away from the station's heart. It was beautiful and deadly. Jay got to work. She opened the access panel on the main sensor array. She connected her diagnostic pad. One by one, she checked each sensor, comparing its readout to the station's master diagnostic. Everything was green, perfectly normal. She was halfway through the list when her communicator buzzed. It was Min. Jay. The grain thing. It's not just one ship. It's a pattern. I talked to Hannah. She sees it too. She says to be careful. The consortium is making big moves. Hannah was a friend, a xenolinguist who understood words and the meanings hidden behind them. If Hannah was worried, it was serious. Jay typed back with one hand while she worked with the other. Understood. Doing routine calibration in alpha coolant. All normal here. She sent the message and returned her full attention to the sensor. The next reading was off. Not by much. A tiny variance in the flow rate. She frowned. She ran the diagnostic again. The variance was still there. It was so small it was almost nothing. But it was new. Her training told her to report it immediately. Her instinct told her to look first. She accessed the local log, looking for the last maintenance entry. It was from the previous day. A standard filter change, authorized by the concordance. The technician ID was listed, but it was a generic code, not a name. That was unusual. A heavy feeling settled in her stomach. She looked through the window at the flowing blue coolant. It looked the same as always, but the number on her screen told a different story. Something had changed. Before she could decide what to do, the door to the monitoring station hissed open. She turned, expecting to see another engineer. 4 concordance security officers filled the doorway. They were clad in full-body armor, their visors down, reflecting the cold blue light of the coolant. In the lead was Officer Tovin. Jay had seen him before. He was known for being strict, never smiling. His face was like stone. Jay of Earth. His voice was hard, without warmth. Yes, she said, standing up. Her tool fell from her lap and clattered on the floor. The sound was very loud in the small room. You are under the arrest of the Galactic Concordance, Section 12, for deliberate acts of sabotage and endangering a critical station system. The words were formal, practiced. Sabotage. The word did not make sense. It floated in the air between them, meaningless. There is a mistake, Jay said, her voice barely a whisper. I am doing calibration. I found a small variance. I was about to report it. Officer Tovin did not listen. He took a step forward. The variance is the result of your actions. You will come with us now. 2 of the other officers moved into the room. They were large, their armor making them seem even bigger. One grabbed her left arm, his grip like a metal vise. The other took her right arm. Please, you can check the logs, Jay said, her voice shaking now. I just got here. The variance was already in the system. You accessed the core diagnostic port at subnode 7 yesterday, Tovin stated, reading from a data slate. You uploaded unauthorized code. That was just an efficiency patch. It has nothing to do with the coolant. The words burst out of her. They sounded weak, desperate. Even to her own ears. To Tovin, they were a confession. You admit to unauthorized modification. That is a violation in itself. The coolant system instability is a direct result. The evidence is clear. It was a trap. The pieces clicked together in her mind. The fake log entry, the tiny variance, her own innocent patch. They had woven it all into a story where she was the villain. Panic rose in her throat, cold and sharp. Please, she said again. But the officers were already moving. They pulled her hands behind her back. The cold, magnetic cuffs snapped around her wrists with a final sound. The hum of the station seemed to grow louder, drowning out her thoughts. They did not lead her out gently. They dragged her. Her boots scraped against the floor as she tried to keep up. She stumbled, and their grip tightened, pulling her upright without slowing down. They entered the main corridor. It was full of beings from a dozen species. The noise of conversation, of machinery, of life, died suddenly as they saw the security detail. All eyes turned to them, to her. Jay saw faces she recognized. A vol trader she had helped with a faulty air filter. A human cargo handler from the next deck. They stared. Their expressions were of shock, confusion, and worst of all, doubt. She wanted to shrink, to disappear. The weight of their stares was heavier than the cuffs. Officer Tovin marched ahead, clearing a path. The other two officers held her arms, making sure everyone could see her. The saboteur caught. A flash of light made her blink. Someone was recording. Of course they were. This was a show. A message. They passed the central food court. In the human section, she saw Mr. Park, her supervisor. His mouth was open. He looked from her to the officers and then quickly looked down at his feet. He did nothing. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than the rough handling. They moved into the transit hub's main concourse, the busiest place on the station. The giant screen that usually showed arrival and departure times was dark. Then it flickered on. For a second, Jay saw her own face, a photo from her station ID, displayed huge for everyone to see. Underneath, in stark letters, it read, "Earthborn saboteur, apprehended." A low murmur went through the crowd. Alien eyes, multifaceted and solid-colored and glowing, all fixed on the small human girl being dragged through their midst. The walk to the security sector felt like it took a year. Every second was stretched out, filled with shame and a dawning, terrible understanding. This was not an error. This was a plan. She was a small, convenient tool in a game she did not understand. Finally, they reached a heavy security door. Tovin placed his hand on a scanner. The door opened to reveal a sterile, white hallway. The sounds of the station vanished, replaced by a hollow silence. They took her to a processing room. They removed the cuffs only long enough to scan her body, take her fingerprints and a DNA sample, and put her into a plain, gray prisoner jumpsuit. Then the cuffs went back on. Officer Tovin stood before her. "You will be held until your hearing. You may speak to your species' diplomatic representative, if they choose to involve themselves. The evidence is overwhelming. I suggest you cooperate." He turned to leave. "The variance," Jay said suddenly, her voice raw but clear in the quiet room. "It's in the Western Flow Regulator. The one they just serviced. Check the internal seal logs. Not the public log. The real one." Tovin paused. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something. Not belief, but a professional's note of an anomaly. He said nothing. He turned and walked out. The door sealed behind him with a deep, solid thud that echoed in the empty space. Jay was alone. The silence was complete. She was in a white room with no window, no screen, nothing. She sat on the hard bench, the cold of the metal seeping through the thin jumpsuit. They had dragged her here. They had shown her alone and guilty to the whole galaxy. They thought she was just one girl, one easy target. She closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she did not see her own fear. She saw the numbers, the 0.5% gain, the cargo log discrepancy, the variance in the coolant flow, the generic technician code. They were just pieces of data, but they were her pieces of data, and they were all wrong. She was alone, but she was not empty. The quiet in the room was not the same as the quiet in her mind. In her mind, she was already working. Time became a strange thing in the white room. There was no clock. The light from the ceiling panels never changed. It was a flat, shadowless light that made everything look sharp and unreal. Jay sat on the bench, her back against the cold wall. She focused on her breathing. It was the only thing she could control. She did not know how much time had passed when the door opened again. It was Officer Tovin. He carried a data slate. Another officer stood behind him, blocking the doorway. Tovin did not sit. He stood in the middle of the room, looking down at her. "The diplomatic representative from your Earth Colony Liaison Office has been informed. They have filed a request for information." His tone said the request would go nowhere. Jay said nothing. She waited. "The evidence is conclusive," Tovin continued. He activated the data slate. A holographic image sprang to life between them. It showed a schematic of the primary coolant system. A red, pulsing dot highlighted the Western Flow Regulator, exactly where she had told him to look. You identified the location of the sabotage correctly. This proves your involvement. Jay stared at the image. The logic was a closed loop designed to trap her. They used her own observation as proof of guilt. Finding a problem does not mean I caused it, she said, her voice quiet but steady. It means I was doing my job. Tovin swiped his hand. The image changed. It showed a log entry.
Unathori kok upolat.
Source: J. Earthborn. Location: Subnode 7. Asterisk. You admitted to this violation. It was an efficiency patch. For the power grid. It has no connection to the coolant systems. They are on separate networks. She knew this was a basic fact. Any engineer knew it. The investigation has found a latent connection. Your code created a vulnerability. He swiped again. Now the display showed a stream of complex data, lines of code mingling in a way that looked damning but meant nothing to her. It was fabricated. It had to be, but it looked real. It looked official. She leaned forward, squinting at the data. She was not a master programmer, but she knew her own work. The structure was wrong. The code they showed had a specific signature, a repeated sequence in the comments that was not her style. It was a habit, a tick of the person who had written this fake evidence. They had used a different compiler, one that left a tiny, unique digital fingerprint on the metadata. They used a Killian model compiler, she said, more to herself than to him. The alignment of the secondary syntax is off by 1 microbyte in the header. Human compilers don't do that. Tovin's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at the data, then back at her. You are inventing details to confuse the issue. I am reading the data you gave me, Jay replied. She met his gaze. The proof you have is fake. Someone else made it. They were careful, but they were not perfect. They left a mark. Look at it. For a moment there was silence. Tovin studied her. He was a man of procedure. He believed in evidence. He had presented what he thought was evidence, and this small, calm girl was pointing out a crack in it. A tiny, technical crack. He could not see it himself. But her certainty was unsettling. He switched off the hologram. Your theories are not relevant. The physical evidence is enough. A tool with your DNA was found near the compromised regulator. This was new. Jay felt a chill. They had planted physical evidence. It was serious now. What tool? A multi-driver. Standard issue. I lost my multi-driver 2 weeks ago. I reported it to my supervisor, Mr. Park. It is in the station's lost property log. She had filed the report immediately. Tools were expensive. Tovin made a note on his data slate. We will verify this. He said it, but his tone suggested he already knew what the verification would find. The log would be missing, or altered. The system was being used against her. Who benefits from this? Jay asked suddenly. The question hung in the white room. Tovin blinked. What? Who benefits? If the coolant system fails, the whole station is at risk. Why would I do that? I live here. But if there was a small, controlled failure blamed on human error, it could be used to push humans out of key jobs, or to give a reason for a new security contract, or to make the Concordance grant control of the hub to a private company that promises better safety. She spoke slowly, thinking it through as she said it. She thought of the Viridian Consortium ships, their bids for trade routes, their petty fraud on cargo logs. You are constructing a fantasy, Tovin said, but his voice was less sure now. You have my brother, Min. He sent me a message about strange cargo logs, consortium logs. Ask him, or ask Hannah, the xenolinguist. She sees patterns in words. Jay was leaning forward now, her cuffed hands in her lap. Please, just look at one thing. Check who authorized the filter change on the coolant regulator yesterday. The real authorization, not the public log. You have access. Tovin stood perfectly still. He was a security officer. His job was to find the truth, even if the truth was inconvenient. This girl was not crying. She was not raging. She was giving him data points, leads. He had arrested many beings. Most shouted. Some begged. This one worked. I will look, he said finally. It was not kindness. It was protocol. But it will not change the facts of your arrest. You uploaded unauthorized code. That is a violation. You will be held for a formal hearing. He turned and left. The door sealed again. Jay let out a long, slow breath. Her heart was pounding. She had done it. She had planted a seed of doubt. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was something. More time passed. A slot at the bottom of the door opened, and a tray of food was pushed through. It was a bland nutrient paste and a cup of water. She ate and drank. She needed to keep her strength. Her mind was her only tool now. She thought of Min. He would have seen the news by now. He would be furious. He would want to break down the door. She hoped Hannah was with him. Hannah would know what to do. Hannah understood systems, not just computer systems, but the systems of power and talk between species. She thought about the station. Her small patch was still running in subnode 7. The hub was using a tiny bit less power because of her. It was a silly thing to think about, but it comforted her. She had made something better. The door opened again. It was not Tovin. It was a different person, a man in the neat, gray suit of a concordance bureaucrat. He had a tired face. He held a data slate. I am Kale. I am here to process your case for the judicial board. He did not sit. He did not look at her directly. He read from the slate. The charges are confirmed. Given the severity, your hearing is scheduled in 10 station days. Your species liaison may submit a statement, but given the physical evidence, the board's decision is likely to be swift. You will be transferred to a long-term holding facility after the hearing. The words were like stones dropping into water. They sank deep and cold. 10 days. Then a decision already made. Then being sent away, where no one could find her. Can I speak to my brother? Or to Hannah? Jay asked. Kale shook his head without looking up. Communication privileges are denied for those charged with high-level threats to station safety. It is standard. Standard. The word was a wall. Is Officer Tovin checking the authorization logs? She pressed. A last, desperate try. Kale glanced at her, annoyed. Security investigations are separate from judicial processing. My role is to move your case forward. He finalized something on his slate. A defender will be assigned to you before the hearing. They will explain the procedures. He turned to leave. He was just a man doing his job, moving paperwork from one side of a desk to another. She was not a person to him. She was a case number. Wait, Jay said as he paused, his hand on the door control. The multi-driver you found. Did it have a small scratch on the handle? A scratch in the shape of a J? I made it when I was learning to use it. Kale looked at his data slate, scrolling. His eyebrows lifted, just a little. He looked at her, a flicker of curiosity in his tired eyes. The evidence report notes a marking on the handle. It was not identified. It's my initial. I carved it there. You can check my personal file. My learning logs from technical school will show I had difficulty with that tool in my first month. The scratch happened then. Kale was silent for a long moment. He looked from the data on his slate to the girl on the bench. Tiny, personal detail. It did not prove she didn't do it, but it proved the tool was, without doubt, hers. The tool they had found was the one she had lost. It was another small crack. I will note it, Kale said, and his tone was not so bored anymore. He left. The door closed. Jay was alone again with the flat, white light. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. She closed them into fists. They had taken everything from her. Her freedom, her name, her future. But they had not taken the facts. The scratch on the tool, the compiler signature, the cargo logs, the variants. They were all small, hard pieces of truth. She held onto them in her mind. They were hers. They were real. In the silence, she began to arrange them, not to prove her innocence to them, but to understand the crime herself. She was an engineer. She fixed broken systems. And this was the most broken system she had ever seen. She just had to figure out how it worked. The news feed on the freighter's mess screen was silent. but the text scrolled with a cold, clear finality. Earthborn apprehended for sabotage on Lyra Station. Concordance cites critical system threat. A grainy image of Jay, her face pale and defiant between two armored officers, flashed on the screen. Min's bowl of reheated noodles sat forgotten. The plastic fork in his hand snapped with a sharp crack. The sound made the other two crewmates at the table jump. Min, one of them started, his voice low with sympathy. Is that your? Min didn't hear the rest. He was on his feet, his chair screeching back. The world had narrowed to the image on the screen. The urge to hit something, to break a console, to scream at the stupid, smug face of the news presenter, was a physical force in his chest. He saw the drag of the officer's hands, the way Jay's feet barely touched the ground. They were treating her like a dangerous animal. His sister, who worried about wasting a single watt of power, he stormed out of the mess and down the narrow corridor to his bunk. He needed to call someone, to demand answers, to get to Lyra Station right now. But as he reached for the comm panel, his hand stopped. Jay's last message was still on his screen. Not a mistake. Check the fee schedule. Someone is saving credits. Be careful. His rage was hot and useless. Jay's mind was always cool, always working. She was in a cell because she saw things others missed. If he charged in like a fool, he would be no help to her. He would just be another problem. He forced himself to breathe. He sat on his bunk, his fists clenched on his knees. Think. Do what she would do. He couldn't fight the concordance. He couldn't break her out. But he could look at the data, the weird cargo logs. He opened his personal datapad, not the ship's official system. He called up the encrypted, peer-to-peer network known among human spacers as the library. It wasn't a place. It was a habit, a shared cloud where engineers, pilots, and mechanics uploaded fixes, workarounds, and warnings about bad contracts or shady operators. It was a collective memory, a way for scattered people to watch each other's backs. He uploaded Jay's last message. He tagged it with her name and the case code from the news report. He added a note of his own. My sister. They say she sabotaged coolant. She found a cargo log anomaly. Viridian Consortium. Grain listed as lubricant. Looking for connections. He sent it into the library. It was a message in a bottle, thrown into a digital ocean. He didn't expect much. He felt helpless. Within an hour, his pad began to quietly chime with notifications. Not loud alerts, but soft pings. The first was a schematic from an engineer on a mining outpost in the belt. Seen this manifest pattern before. Viridian uses it to move proprietary bioagents without declaring them. Attaching old case file. The second was from a freighter pilot. Lyra Station's traffic control logs show a priority rerouting for consortium ships during system diagnostics that never show on public schedules. Attached timestamps. The third was from a software coder. Heard about the case. Unauthorized code upload is the charge? Ask what compiler they claim she used. Human coders have stylistic fingerprints. Can maybe disprove. They were small things. Pieces of a puzzle from people he had never met, who only knew Jay as a name and a face on a news feed. They asked for nothing. They just gave what they had. Min wasn't alone. Hannah sat in her quiet office on Lyra Station. The news was on in the background. She had watched the arrest footage 3 times, her professional detachment cracking a little more each time. She saw the shock on Jay's face, the rough hands, the public shame. Hannah worked with words. She knew how powerful they were. The words being used now were saboteur, threat, unauthorized. They were building a story. Hannah's job was to understand the stories between species, to find the true meaning hidden in the polite phrases and formal agreements. The story around Jay was too neat. It was a closed narrative. In her experience, true stories were messy. They had loose ends. She accessed the public judicial docket for Jay's case. It was all in order. Charges filed. Evidence logged. Hearing scheduled. But she looked at the ancillary codes, the financial and administrative tags attached to the case file. To most, it was bureaucratic noise. To Hannah, it was a language. There was a string of numbers, a routing code for the legal fees and fines accruing to the case. She followed the code. It didn't lead to the standard concordance judicial treasury. It bounced through a shell account, a temporary holding fund. Such funds were sometimes used for sensitive operations. She cross-referenced the fund identifier with other public records, using a linguistic analysis algorithm designed to find patterns in naming conventions. The shell account had a sibling, another fund used to pay for a private security review of Lyra Station's infrastructure 6 months prior. The review had been commissioned by the Station Oversight Committee. The winning bidder for that review contract was listed as a subsidiary. The subsidiary was wholly owned by the Viridian Consortium. Her screen glowed with the connections. The consortium had been hired to find weaknesses in the station's security. Now, a weakness had been found, a human saboteur. The fines from Jay's case were being routed to a fund linked to them. It was a circular path. They were paying themselves to prove a problem they had been hired to find. It wasn't proof of a frame-up. Not in a court, but it was a story of benefit. She compiled her findings into a clear, concise document. Not an accusation, just an observation of curious financial pathways. She addressed it to the Human Liaison Office, but she did not send it through official channels. Official channels could be blocked, monitored, or lost. She uploaded it to the same library Min had used. She tagged it with Jay's name and the word context. Back in the White Room, Jay had no window, no screen, no news. She had only the silence and the thoughts in her head. She ran the numbers. She visualized the coolant flow diagrams. She thought about the scratch on the multidriver. A personal detail in an impersonal frame-up. That was a mistake.
Ergens. The door slaat opened.
Another tray of paste. But as the tray was pushed in, something small and metallic tumbled off its edge and landed on the floor with a faint click. Jay waited until the slot closed. She slowly got off the bench and picked it up. It was a standard conductive data pin used for basic file transfers. It was unmarked. Someone had just risked a lot to give this to her. Her heart beat faster. She looked at the blank wall. There was nothing to plug it into. They had taken everything from her. But they had not taken her mind. She held the pin in her cuffed hands. It was a message. It was a sign. It meant someone on the outside was working. Min Hannah. Others. She didn't know. She slipped the pin into the one place she could hide it. The seam of her jumpsuit, near the collar. It was a small, hard piece of hope. She went back to her bench. The White Room was the same. The silence was the same. But everything was different. They had dragged her into custody to isolate her, to make her a single, broken link. They did not understand. When you isolate one human, you don't break the chain. You just give the rest of the chain a single, undeniable point to focus on. A point to pull against. Alone on her bench, Jay allowed herself a small, thin smile. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of an engineer who has just found the faulty connection in a broken system. They had left her alone, but they had not isolated her. And that was their first, biggest mistake. The days in the White Room bled together. Jay marked time by the arrival of the food trays. She did exercises to keep her body from stiffening. She slept when she was tired, but mostly she thought. She turned the facts over in her mind, examining them from every angle like the parts of a broken machine. The door hissed open. It was Officer Tovin again. He looked the same, stern and solid, but there was a new tension around his eyes. He carried no data slate. "Your hearing is in 3 days," he said, his voice flat. "A defender has been assigned. You will meet them tomorrow." Jay nodded. She said nothing. Tovin did not leave. He stood there, his hands clasped behind his back. He was looking at her, really looking, as if seeing her for the first time. "The tool," he said finally. "The multi-driver. The log of your loss report was deleted from the station's public system." Jay felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. Of course it was. However, Tovin continued, his voice dropping slightly, the backup cache in the engineering department's local server still had a record. Your supervisor, Mr. Park, confirmed you reported it missing. The marking on the tool matches your description. Jay let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It was a tiny victory. A single, true fact had survived. It does not prove you did not use it later, Tovin said, but the statement was automatic, hollow. It only proves it was once yours. And the authorization for the coolant service? Jay asked quietly. Tovin's jaw tightened. The official work order was approved by a mid-level station manager. That manager has taken a sudden leave of absence. His authorization codes were used, but the security footage for his office during that time is corrupted. Another piece. Another cover-up. The system was cleaning itself. So the evidence against me is built on deleted logs, corrupted footage, and a tool I lost, Jay said, not as a question, but as a summary. Tovin did not confirm it. He did not deny it. His silence was louder than words. He was a man who believed in order, and the order around this case was crumbling into lies. The hearing will proceed based on the evidence presented to the board. My role is security, not judgment. He turned to go, then paused. You requested a datapad to review the evidence against you. The request is unusual, but it has been approved. It will be brought to you this afternoon. It is a read-only device. No external connections. He left. Jay's mind was already racing. A datapad, a window, a tool. Later, a different officer brought it. It was a simple, gray tablet. The officer watched as Jay turned it on. The screen showed only two things: a folder labeled Case Evidence and a basic text editor that could not save files. The device had no wireless signal. It was an island of information. The officer left, locking her in again with the pad. Jay opened the evidence folder first. It was all the same fabricated data streams, the false code connections, the damning logs. She skimmed through it, not needing to study the lies again. She opened the text editor. The blank screen glowed. She could type, but it would vanish when she powered the pad down. It was a pointless feature, meant for making notes that would never be kept. She stared at the white glow. Then she began to type. Not notes, not a defense. She began to draw. Using letters, numbers, and symbols, she started to map the station. She drew the main concourse with X's and dashes. She marked the location of subnode 7 with a small S. She marked the Alpha Coolant Monitoring Station with a C. She drew the service corridors between them. It was a rough, childish map, but it was a start.in the margin. She wrote the numbers. Asterisk 0.5% gain. Variance in W. Flow reg cargo log. Grain/lube. Asterisk. She looked at her map. She thought about the hidden data pin in her collar. She thought about Min, who saw problems in cargo holds. She thought about Hannah, who saw patterns in words. They could not communicate. But what if they didn't need to? What if they just needed to look at the same problem? Jay knew Min. He was on a freighter, probably going out of his mind with anger. But he was smart. He would go to the data. He would look for her in the only place she could be. In her work, in the patterns she saw. He would check the library. He would be looking for a signal. She looked at her crude map on the datapad. She needed to leave a signal. Something only he would understand. Something from their shared language. Not of words, but of home. She erased the map. She thought back to their childhood in the Solarcology. Their tiny apartment. The walls were always too close. To escape, they played a game. They would draw fantastic maps of imaginary worlds on scraps of recycled paper. They had a code for important locations. A treasure was a circle with a dot in the center. A trap was a zigzag line. A safe place was a small square with a triangle on top. Like a little house. A safe place. A place to find something. On the blank screen of the datapad, Jay carefully used the text cursor to draw. She made a small square. On top of it, she made a triangle. Their symbol for a safe place. Next to it, she drew a series of numbers and letters. Asterisk N7.
Oh, bon.
3C. Asterisk subnode 7. Auxiliary panel 3C. It was a specific minor access point in the power grid junction she had fixed. It was a panel so unimportant no one ever checked it. Perfect safe place. She was not writing a message. She was leaving a marker, a coordinate. If Min, or anyone who knew her patterns, could somehow see the screen, They would see a childish drawing and a location. They would know to look there. But how could anyone see it? The pad would be taken away. The text would be erased. Then, she had an idea. A desperate, simple idea. When the officer came with her next meal tray, Jay was sitting calmly on her bench. The datapad was on the floor beside her, the screen dark. "I have finished reviewing the evidence," she said, her voice tired. "You can take the pad." The officer, a young man who never spoke, just picked up the pad and left. Jay waited. Her heart was a drum in her chest. She had done the only thing she could. She had left her message, and then she had given the pad back. The pad would be wiped and given to another prisoner or stored in a locker. Her drawing was already gone. But the pad itself was a physical object. It had been in her cell. It had her fingerprints on it. It was now part of the story. She had touched it. She had used it. That was all she could do. She thought of the data pin hidden in her collar, a gift from the outside, and the datapad, a tool from the inside that she had briefly held. They were just objects, but in the silence of her cell, they felt like the two ends of a wire held apart, waiting for a connection. She lay down on the bench, looking up at the unchanging white ceiling. She had done her part. She had found the flaws in the false evidence. She had planted a seed of doubt in Tovin. She had left a marker, a whisper into the void. Now, she had to trust, not in the concordance, not in the system, but in the quiet, stubborn network of her own people. In Min's loyalty, in Hannah's cleverness, in the habits of engineers who shared their fixes and their warnings. They had dragged her into this white, silent room to be alone. But the silence was an illusion. The room was full of the echoes of every connection she had ever made, every problem she had ever solved, every person who had ever looked at her and seen not just a girl from Earth, but a mind that could not leave a broken thing unfixed. She closed her eyes. The hearing was in 3 days. The board would see only the lies presented to them. The outcome was fixed. But the game was no longer just about the hearing. It was about what happened in the spaces between. In the deleted logs, the corrupted footage, the quiet exchanges in a shared library, and a childish drawing on a screen that no longer existed. The consortium had made a plan to remove one small human. They did not understand that you cannot delete a human from the network. You can only make them a focal point, and a focal point gathers light. The datapad from Jay's cell was wiped, tagged, and placed on a shelf in a secure storage room. It was one of 50 identical pads. It meant nothing to anyone. The human freighter carrying Min finally docked at a way station called Port Echo, 2 jumps away from Lyra. Min's first action was not to demand passage to his sister. Instead, he found the station's communal engineering terminal, a public access point for freight crews to file reports. He logged in with his personal credentials. He opened a diagnostic window and then, with a few quick keystrokes, he opened a back channel to the library. The quiet pings had become a steady stream. A schematic from a water reclamation engineer showed how a coolant system could be subtly destabilized with a magnetic pulse, not a software change. A traffic controller in another sector confirmed the strange priority logs for consortium ships, adding that they often carried classified sensor equipment. A clerk in the Concordance's own logistics division, a young woman from Mars, sent a fragment of an internal memo questioning the singular focus on the human suspect given systemic maintenance lapses. Min compiled everything. He felt like he was building a shadow case, a ghost of the truth. But it was all circumstantial. It was all around Jay, not proof of her innocence. He needed something solid. He needed her. He reread her last messages. Subnode 7 is happier now. That was her voice, proud of her little fix. He pulled up the public schematics for Lyra Station, finding Subnode 7. He stared at the complex web of power lines and data conduits. Where would she hide something? Where would she leave a sign? He thought of their childhood maps, the little house symbol for a safe place. He smiled sadly. They hadn't played that in years. He dismissed the thought. This was real. This was serious. His eyes scanned the schematic. Auxiliary junctions. Maintenance access panels. His gaze stopped on a label, *AUX. Pan. 3 C star. It was a nothing panel. It didn't regulate anything critical. It was the kind of place only someone who knew the system intimately, someone who loved its quiet corners, would even notice. A tingle went up his spine.
Astérisco. Pan.
3C. Asterisk. It was a guess. A wild guess. But it was the only one he had. He couldn't go to Lyra Station. He was just a freighter crewman. But others could. He uploaded a new request to the library. Not data this time. A call. Asterisk. Need visual on Lyra Station. Subnode 7. Auxiliary panel 3C. Any human eyes nearby. It's for J. Asterisk. On Lyra Station, the news cycle had moved on. A new sports season was starting in the Proxima League. The human saboteur was old news. Life in the hub returned to its normal rhythm and a lower deck maintenance corridor. A woman named Sumi was replacing a faulty air filter. She was an environmental systems tech, born on a lunar colony. She had seen the arrest footage. It had bothered her the way the girl was dragged. She had checked the library once, seen the growing file tagged with Jay's name. She hadn't contributed. What could she do? During her break, she checked the library again out of habit. She saw Min's new request. Asterisk. Subnode 7. Auxiliary panel 3C. Any human eyes. Asterisk. Sumi finished her break. Her next job was in the adjacent sector. Subnode 7 was a slight detour. She told herself she was just being curious. The node was quiet, just a humming room of blue light. She found the main junction. On the far wall, almost hidden behind a larger conduit, was a small, square access panel labeled 3C. It was sealed with a simple mechanical latch, not even a digital lock. It was that unimportant. Sumi looked around. The corridor was empty. Her heart beat a little faster. This was stupid. She was risking her job. She reached out and flipped the latch. The panel swung open silently. Inside, it was not empty. There was no secret device, no glowing bomb. Instead, wedged neatly against the inner wall, was a small, sealed cylinder made of a ceramic polymer. It was unmarked. Sumi knew what it was instantly. A data storage cylinder, the kind used for secure, long-term backups. It was magnetically shielded. It would not show up on a scan. She picked it up. It was cool and light in her hand. This was not Jay's. Jay had been arrested weeks ago. This was new. This was the real sabotage device. The one meant to fail later and prove the human sabotage was ongoing. It had been hidden in the one place Jay loved, the place she had fixed. The perfect frame. Sumi did not take it. She did not run to security. She knew where that would lead. More deleted logs. More disappeared evidence. She took out her personal comm unit. She took 3 pictures. One of the open panel. One of the cylinder inside it. One with the cylinder in her hand, with the node's lighting strips in the background for proof of location. The images were time-stamped and geotagged by the device itself. This was evidence that could not be easily faked. She carefully placed the cylinder back exactly as she found it. She closed the panel. She left. In her quarters that night. She uploaded the pictures to the library. She tagged them with Jay's name and the coordinates. She added no comment. The pictures screamed for themselves. Min saw the pictures first. His breath caught in his throat. There it was. A device. Hidden in her node. In the exact panel he had guessed. Felt like a miracle, but it wasn't. It was his sister thinking several steps ahead. Even from a cell. She had left a marker and he had understood. The little house on a hill. The safe place. He downloaded the images. He combined them with Hannah's financial trail, with the engineer's notes on magnetic pulses, with the traffic logs. He wove it all into a single, simple document. It did not accuse. Presented. Here is a hidden device. Here are strange financial paths leading to the consortium. Here are logs showing their ships had opportunity. Here is the flawed evidence against J. He did not send it to the concordance. He knew what would happen to it there. Instead, he sent it to every public newsnet feed he could access. Not to the official channels, but to the citizen forums, the independent journalism hubs, the exchange boards used by 100 different species. He posted it anonymously but with a clear title, Questions about the Lyra Station Saboteur. Hannah, monitoring the data streams from her office, saw the document appear. She saw the pictures. Cold, clean anger filled her. They had not just framed Jay. They had defiled her work, her little act of care, by hiding their poison in it. Hannah used her skills. She translated the document, not into other languages, into other contexts. For the Vol, who valued ecological balance, she highlighted the risk to the station's life support. For the Illusions, who prized artistic integrity, she framed the fake evidence as a clumsy forgery. For the Mercantile Grath, she focused on the financial fraud and the threat to trade stability. She released these tailored versions into the same public streams. The story was no longer a human problem. It was a station problem, a truth problem. The consortium's quiet, efficient plan began to crack. The story spread. It was too coherent, too detailed, with evidence that felt real. A hidden device was something beings could understand. A financial loop was something they could trace. On Lyra Station, Officer Toven sat at his desk. The public feeds were not part of his duty, but a colleague had shown him. He saw the picture of the cylinder in Auxiliary Panel 3C. He recognized the location from the station schematics. He remembered Jay's calm voice. Check the internal seal logs. The real one. He had checked. They were falsified. He had said nothing, bound by procedure. But this was different. This was physical, undeniable evidence that confirmed her theory. Evidence he had not found. Evidence that had been found by the network she was part of. He stood up. His duty was to the station's safety. That device, real or not, was a threat. He mobilized a security team. He went to Subnode 7 himself. He opened Auxiliary Panel 3C. The cylinder was gone. Someone had gotten there first. The consortium was cleaning up, erasing the proof. But it was too late. The pictures were already light years away, spreading across the galaxy. You could delete an object. You could not delete an idea once it had been shared. Toven stood in the empty space behind the panel. He felt the walls of his orderly world bending. The girl in the cell had been right, and she had not been alone, not even for a second. The door to Jay's cell opened. It was Officer Toven. He carried no tray, no data slate. He held only a small, clear case. Inside it, resting on a black cloth, was a simple data pin. You requested a pad to review evidence. You have finished. But you are entitled to prepare a statement for the hearing, he said. His voice was different. It was not softer, but it was precise, like a man choosing each word with care. You may use this. It will connect to a local printer only. You may write your truth. It will be included in the official record. He placed the case on the bench beside her. He did not meet her eyes. The hearing is tomorrow at 0900 station time. He turned and left. Jay looked at the data pin. It was standard issue. It was also a test. Or a gift. She wasn't sure. She picked up the case. The pin inside was identical to the one hidden in her collar seam. The one from the outside. She removed the new pin. She held both in her hand, the one given openly by authority, the one smuggled in secret by a friend. Two ends of the same wire. She inserted the official pin into the small port on her cell's wall where a printer could connect. A simple text interface appeared on a small, basic screen. It was for her defense statement. The words would be printed, put in a file, and seen by the board. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall. She looked at the blank screen. Then she looked at the other pin, the secret one that she knew what she had to do. It was a risk. It might be exactly what they wanted, to see what she would do with an unsupervised tool. But Toven's demeanor had shifted. The doubt she had planted had grown. This was a crack. She had to push. She removed the official pin. She took the secret pin from her collar and inserted it into the port. The screen flickered. A directory opened. There were no files, just a single text document labeled, "Read me." Jay opened it. It was from Hannah. The message was clear, factual, and devastating. Jay, the device was found where you guessed. Pictures taken. Now public. Financial trail leads to Viridian Consortium shell account. They are erasing tracks. The station manager who authorized coolant work has disappeared. Your multi-driver log was deleted but found in backup. Officer Tovin knows. He is struggling against his own system. The hearing tomorrow is a formality. They will convict you to save face. Your only chance is the public. Tell a story only you can tell. Not about systems. About the scratch on the tool. About the game you played with Min. Make them see you. We are here. We are watching. Jay read it 3 times. She memorized it. Then she deleted the document. She removed the secret pin and tucked it back into her seam. She inserted the official pin. The blank statement screen returned. Her heart was pounding. They had found the device. The truth was out there. But here, in this room, the official machine was still going to crush her. The board would not look at public news feeds. They would look at the official evidence file, which was still full of lies. Hannah was right. She had to change the story in the room. She began to type. Not a technical defense. She wrote about the multi-driver. How it was her first proper tool. How her hands were too small for it, and it slipped while she was repairing a hydration reclaimer in school. It scratched the handle. She carved the J to remind herself to be more careful, to focus. She wrote about how losing it felt like losing a part of her training, her history. She wrote about reporting it, hoping someone honest would find it and return it. She wrote about Subnode 7. Not about the code, but about the waste. She described the feeling of seeing energy bleed away into nothing, every second, every day. How it was like a silent leak on a spaceship. You might not die today, but the loss weakened everything. She fixed it because she could not stand the leak. It was that simple. She wrote about the game with Min drawing maps. How the little house symbol meant a safe place to store treasures, which were usually pretty rocks or stolen dessert bars. She did not mention Auxiliary Panel 3C. She just described the game. She wrote about the arrest. The feel of the magnetic cuffs, cold and heavy. The sound of her boots scraping. The look on Mr. Park's face as he looked away. The silence of her friends. She did not accuse the consortium. She did not talk about fake evidence. She simply stated her own truth in simple human details. When she was finished, she sent it to the printer. A mechanical hum came from the wall, and a single sheet of paper slid out. Her statement felt flimsy, a piece of paper against a galaxy of lies. She picked it up. The words were there. Her story. The door opened. It was Cale, the bureaucrat. He looked tired and annoyed. Your defender is here for a final consultation. It is a courtesy. Make it quick. A man entered. He was human, dressed in a cheap, neat suit. He looked nervous. He held a concordance issue data slate. I am your assigned defender. I have reviewed the case. The evidence is substantial. I advise you to plead guilty to the lesser charge of unauthorized code modification. I may be able to negotiate a reduced sentence, possibly only deportation and a permanent work ban. He was not looking at her. He was reading from his slate. He was part of the machine, smoothing its operation. Jay held out her printed statement. This is what I will say tomorrow. The defender took the paper, glanced at it. He frowned. This is not a legal argument. This is personal anecdote. It is not relevant. It is the only thing that is relevant, Jay said quietly. He handed the paper back, dismissive. The board will not care about a childhood game. They care about station security. My advice stands. Plead to the lesser charge. He left. Cale gave her a last, empty look and sealed the door. Jay was alone again with her piece of paper. The defender's reaction was what she expected. But she was not writing for him, or even for the board. She thought about the public feeds, the pictures of the device. Her story, this simple human story, was the key that would make those pictures make sense. It would turn a technical frame-up into a personal crime. The scratch on the tool, the game of maps, they were the proof that she was real, and the evidence against her was not. She folded the paper and held it. She thought of Min seeing the pictures. She thought of Hannah translating the truth for a dozen species. She thought of Sumi, a stranger, opening that panel. The consortium had tried to isolate a single point of failure, her. They did not understand that, in a network, isolating a point doesn't break it. It defines it. It tells every other part of the network exactly where to send help. She was the point, and the help had arrived. Tomorrow they would hold their hearing. They would read their lies. She would read her simple truths. And outside the room, a galaxy was already starting to listen to a different story. The one she and Min and Hannah and Sumi and 100 others had written together. They had dragged a girl into custody. But they had not captured her story. And her story was no longer hers alone. The hearing room was cold and smelled of clean air and polished metal. It was not large. There was a raised bench for the 3 concordance adjudicators, a Vol, a Grath, and an Illusion. They looked down at the room with calm, alien faces. There was a table for the prosecutor, a severe-looking woman with a stack of data slates. There was a small, empty table for Jay's defender. He was already there, fidgeting. Jay sat on a solitary chair in the center of the room. She wore the same gray prisoner jumpsuit. Her hands were free. Officer Toven stood by the door, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the far wall. The head adjudicator, the Vol, spoke with a voice like rustling leaves. This hearing is to determine culpability in the matter of sabotage on Lyra Station. The evidence has been submitted. We will now hear final statements. It was clear from his tone the hearing was a formality. The decision was already in the data slates. The prosecutor stood. She was efficient. She summarized the technical evidence. The unauthorized code, the coolant system variants, the tool with Jay's DNA. She called it a clear and present danger. She asked for a guilty verdict and permanent detention in a secure facility. It took 10 minutes. It was clean, logical, and cold. The head adjudicator turned his large, multifaceted eyes to Jay's defender. And the defense? The defender stood up. He cleared his throat. Given the weight of evidence, the defense advises the accused to plead to the lesser charge of unauthorized system modification. We hope for leniency. The adjudicators nodded, almost in unison. This was expected. This was how things were done. The Grath adjudicator reached for a seal to stamp the verdict. Jay stood up. Her movement was quiet, but it stopped the room. Her defender looked at her, alarmed. The adjudicators paused. I would like to read my statement, Jay said. Her voice did not shake. The prosecutor sighed. The accused has submitted a personal narrative. It is not evidentiary. I would like to read it, Jay repeated, looking at the Vol adjudicator. The Vol studied her. There was a long silence. Proceed. It rustled. Jay unfolded her single piece of paper. She did not look at the adjudicators. She did not look at the prosecutor. She looked at the words she had written. She began to read. She read about the multi-driver, about the scratch and the carved J. She read about the waste of energy in subnode 7, a small, constant leak that hurt her to see. She read about playing maps with her brother Min, about the little house symbol for a safe place. She read about the feel of the cuffs, the sound of her boots, the silence of people she knew. It was not a defense. It was a portrait of a person who cared about small things, who remembered tools, who hated waste, who loved her brother. A specific person, not a saboteur, a fixer. When she finished, the room was silent. The story hung in the air, a simple human thing in a room of complex lies. It did not disprove a single technical point, but it made the technical points feel suddenly cheap and hollow. The prosecutor broke the silence. A touching story, irrelevant. The evidence stands. The head adjudicator was about to speak when the door to the hearing room hissed open. This was not protocol. Officer Toven moved to block it, but then he stopped. Kale, the bureaucrat, stood there. He looked paler than usual. He held a data slate that was blinking with high-priority alerts. He hurried to the adjudicator's bench and whispered urgently, showing them the slate. The adjudicator's calm faces changed. The illusion's silver skin flushed with a dark ripple of emotion. The Grath let out a low rumble. The Val's antennae stiffened. The head adjudicator turned back to the room. His rustling voice was now sharp. This hearing is suspended. New, critical evidence has entered the public domain. It directly concerns the integrity of this case. He looked at Jay, his faceted eyes unreadable. The accused will be returned to temporary holding. This board will reconvene after review. Jay was led out by Officer Tovin. As they walked down the sterile hallway, Tovin spoke, his voice very low. The images, the financial traces, they are everywhere. The public newsnets are demanding an inquiry. The consortium has issued a denial, but they have also recalled 3 of their ships from Lyra Station. He wasn't telling her this as an officer. He was telling her as a man who had seen a machine break. Back in her white cell, Jay waited. She did not know what would happen, but the feeling in the hearing room had shifted. The absolute certainty was gone. Hours later, the door opened. It was not Tovin or Kale. It was the head adjudicator, the Val, alone. He stood in the doorway, his large body almost filling it. The device in the auxiliary panel, he rustled. You knew it was there. I knew someone would put it there, Jay said. They used my work to hide their plan. It was disrespectful. The Val made a soft clicking sound, a sign of deep thought. Your people, they found it. They shared the discovery. They created a noise, a loud one. They were just looking for the truth, Jay said. It was a coordinated action, the Val stated. No, Jay shook her head. It was just what we do. When one of us is in trouble, the others look. We share what we find. It's a habit. The Val was silent for a long time. He was understanding that the habit of a species was more powerful than the plan of a corporation. The official evidence against you is compromised. The hearing will be dissolved. The case is being reopened, with a new investigation focused on the consortium's activities. You will be released. There will be conditions. You must remain on the station. Jay nodded. It was not an apology. It was a correction of an error. Later, the door opened for the last time. Officer Tovin stood there. He held a bundle, her old gray maintenance suit, cleaned and folded. You can change, he said. Then you are free to go. She changed in the cell. The jumpsuit felt like a skin she was shedding. When she stepped out into the hallway in her normal clothes, she felt light, unreal. Tovin walked her to the security sector exit. At the door, he stopped. He did not look at her. I did not know, he said, the words tight. I served a system that was used. Jay looked at him. He was a man who believed in order, and his ordered world had betrayed him. I know, she said. She walked out. The door closed behind her, sealing away the white silence. The main corridor of the hub was the same as before. The noise, the smells, the aliens moving past. But it was different. As she walked, heads turned. Not the stares of accusation from before. These were different. A Grathan trader gave her a slow, deep nod. An illusion she had never met offered a small, graceful hand gesture of respect. A human cargo handler from a different shift smiled briefly, a flash of solidarity. They knew, not all the details, but they knew the story. The girl who was framed, the people who fought back with facts. She went to the central food court. She saw Min first. He was standing near the human section, looking anxious, scanning the crowd. When he saw her, his face broke. He ran forward and wrapped her in a crushing hug. He didn't say anything. He just held on. Over his shoulder, Jay saw Hannah walking calmly towards them, a real smile on her face. Behind Hannah, Jay saw others. Sumi, the environmental tech, giving a shy wave. A few other human engineers and freighters she vaguely recognized from the station roles. They had all been part of the net. They had all pulled. She was not alone. She had never been alone. Min finally let go, wiping his eyes angrily. Your stupid map game, he muttered, his voice thick. Hannah reached them. Your statement was perfect, she said. It made you a person. The pictures were proof. But your story made the proof mean something. They got food and sat at a table by the clear wall watching the ships. It was quiet, normal. The hub thrummed around them. Min talked in a rush about the library, about the pictures, about the traffic logs. Hannah explained the financial trail. Jay listened. She ate her food. It tasted better than anything she could remember. After a while, she looked out at the docking arm where the sleek Viridian Consortium ship had been. It was gone. In its place was a simple Concordance patrol vessel. The system had corrected itself. Not because it was good, but because it had been forced to. Forced by the quiet, stubborn network that refused to let a single point of failure be erased. Jay finished her meal. She looked at the station around her, at the energy flowing through its veins. Somewhere, Subnode 7 was still running, 0.5% more efficient than it was supposed to be. Her small, quiet gift was still there, working. She had been dragged into custody to be silenced. But they had only succeeded in making her a signal. And the whole human network had answered. They had thought they were taking one girl out of the picture. They did not realize they were putting her right at the center of it. And that is a mistake you only make once.